Ocarina of Time is one of the most appreciated and beloved games of the Zelda franchise and in the gaming community. It has gained a 99% on Metacritic, and countless other game review websites consider this an A+ game. The game came out in November 1998 in Japan and North America and was the first Zelda game in 3D. The game set a whole lot of standards for action-adventure games afterwards, including lock-on targeting. This game has been countlessly reviewed by thousands of people and for all the right reasons. I know I'm not new to this scene of Ocarina of Time reviews, but after playing the game both the N64 and 3DS version, I really wanted to talk about it. My review might not be as in-depth or that good. I found two YouTubers, Matthew Matosis and King K, who did a phenomenal job in their reviews of this game, and I'll leave a link in the description to both of their videos. Anyways, let's jump right into the review. Ocarina of Time takes place in the most essential part of the Zelda timeline. After this game, the timeline splits into three different areas consisting of the adult and child timeline, timelines where you defeat Ganon, and a fallen hero timeline, where you fail to do so. The game starts off with the Great Deku Tree warning Navi of the impending doom that is coming upon Hyrule. Navi then wakes Link up and warns him what is happening. Link goes to the Great Deku Tree to find out he is ill and goes inside to heal him. Once he does so, Link sadly sees the one person who raised him pass away. Link goes to Zelda and is told to get the other spiritual stones in order to get the Master Sword to defeat Ganondorf before any trouble comes upon Hyrule. So Link travels to meet the Gorons and Zora to get the spiritual stones, and in doing so comes back to find Zelda running away from Ganondorf. Zelda throws the Ocarina of Time to Link, and Link goes to the Temple of Time to use the spiritual stones to open a door to get to the Master Sword. Doing so sends Link into a coma for 7 years, and he wakes up to find out that Ganondorf did bring Hyrule to ruin. Link now has to awaken 5 sages in order to get and defeat Ganondorf. Link travels to the Forest Temple to awaken Saria, the Fire Temple to awaken Darunia, the Water Temple to awaken Ruto, the Shadow Temple to awaken Impa, and the Spirit Temple to awaken Nabooru. Doing so, Link has to travel far and wide, and even back to the past to do so. Link does awaken the 5 sages, and all of them, along with the 6th and 7th sage, Rauru and Zelda, defeat Ganondorf and seal him away, and peace returns to Hyrule. With the story out of the way, let's talk about some things I love and hate about the game. The story of Ocarina of Time is a bit basic, but because of the gameplay and characters, the game feels like a completely different story. I love how the game starts out with Navi being sent out to bring Link to the Great Deku Tree. I always enjoy the beginning of games, and this is no different. Getting the sword and shield and going inside the Deku Tree is so enjoyable. I love this first dungeon because it is a great start dungeon for anyone wanting to know how to play a 3D Zelda game. I also like the battle between Queen Goma and young Link, which is engaging yet short. Dodongo's Cavern is also a good beginner game, but then the difficulty gets harder with Jabba Jabba's Belly. I know a lot of people don't enjoy this game, especially with young Princess Ruto, but I think throwing Ruto to attack enemies is quite fun. Once you get the Master Sword, the dungeons become harder and more enjoyable. The puzzles, enemies, and bosses become significantly harder. My favorite dungeons were the Fire Temple, Forest Temple, and Spirit Temple. Forest Temple has unique puzzles like untwisting and twisting the corridor, which allows you to access new parts of the dungeon. The Fire Temple is cool because in order to get the keys, you have to rescue all of the Gorons. This makes me feel like I'm doing my part to get the Triforce of Courage. Spirit Temple is one of the best dungeons for a number of reasons. You have to first visit the dungeon as Child Link in order to unlock the second half of the dungeon. Child Link part is much more challenging because you're facing tough enemies while having a weak sword, and you can take more damage. The puzzles involving light and the mirror shield makes you think of how the light will move and where to get the light. Also, the music makes you feel like you're in an old abandoned desert temple. The bosses you face in all of these dungeons are engrossing and impressive. I love facing Phantom Ganon, Morpha, Twinrova, and Baronade. They all have unique ways of fighting each other. Ganon is cool because you have to aim at the pictures to fire an arrow, and you could aim at the wrong one. Then, you get to play a tennis match with him with a lightning bolt, and once it hits him, you can attack him with your sword. Morpho was challenging to me because it was hard for me to latch onto him with the long shot. I think if you don't corner him, then the boss feels slightly enticing, especially when he adds more tentacles to grab you. Baronade was fun as Child Link and felt like the hardest boss for Link. I love hitting the wires connecting him to the ceiling with the boomerang. Then you got to avoid getting hit by him and his jellyfish force field. Twin Rova was unique to me because you mainly used the new mirror shield to attack her. In the first phase, which is Kunume and Kotake, you use the shield to reflect off the attacks from one sister to the other. Then in the second phase, you use one of the attacks to charge up your shield so you can fire at them. The items you get in this game are quite different from one another and add a whole new experience to using them in a 3D setting. The Longshot and Goron Hammer were my favorites. The Longshot can be used for multiple purposes like going to other areas too far away from you, stunning enemies, grabbing items, and even using it against the boss. Morpha. The Goron Hammer can be used to defeat enemies, smash switches, and break rocks that can't be broken by bombs. The music for each dungeon is unique and specific for each dungeon. I love hearing the music in Shadow, Forest, and Spirit Temple. It makes the game feel more real and creates an exclusive feeling you only feel in that dungeon. The characters in this game are all great, with some being my most favorite like Sheik and Darunia. With Darunia, you help him regain his joy and defeat the Dongos so the Gorons can eat it again. You also save him and his fellow Gorons in the Fire Temple. Darunia considers Link a brother, and that connection between them both is great. Zelda is also another wonderful character. She helps you out in the beginning by giving you a letter to access Death Mountain. Then when she flees from Ganondorf, she gives you the Ocarina of Time to open the way to the Master Sword. She disguises herself as Sheik and gives you songs and hints about each temple you go to. Zelda then helps you with the Triforce of Wisdom to defeat Ganon. Her character and yours make the most improvement, and that's what I love about the game. Ganon as an antagonist is amazing to me. His presence feels very threatening and ominous. It makes me feel like there's a great evil before me. The fight with him is slightly challenging, but I like his second phase when he transforms into his beast form. The sky is full of lightning and thunder. Beast Ganon towers over you with two large swords. I don't like the fact that it is easy to defeat him. You can literally roll under his legs and slash at his tail. And with the big Goron sword, it makes this fight 10 times easier. But the atmosphere is fitting and well done. Every time I take him on, it feels like the fate of the world lies in my hands. Even though I can talk about how much I love this game for hours, there are some things I didn't enjoy, and I'll talk about that. The mini dungeons in this game aren't good enough. They're pretty basic and easy to get through. Ice Cavern is my least favorite because of the blue fire. If you don't have enough empty bottles, you're gonna have to keep going back to the room to get blue fire to advance further in this dungeon. The bottom of the wall, although being very unsettling and unnerving with all the blood and skeletons, feels short and hardly a challenge. If you're only there to grab the lens of truth, then this dungeon will be over in 5 minutes, especially if you know where all the hidden rooms and trap floors are. Gerudo Fortress gets confusing because you can easily end up going back to the same room like 10 times. I just wish there was a map for this mini dungeon. The Water Temple and Shadow Temple feel basic and not as enjoyable as the other dungeons. The Water Temple feels tedious, even though the 3DS fixed the problem with the iron boots. Although you're mostly doing in the dungeon raising and lowering the water. The enemies do feel harder in water, but out of water they're easier to handle. The Shadow Temple is a very dark and airy dungeon, but without those elements in this dungeon feels basic and hardly challenging. If you have an increased magic meter and always try to break pots, you'll be able to use the Lens of Truth for most of the dungeon. It makes the dungeon not feel like so much of a challenge. Volvagia and Bobongo are the hardest bosses you face. Volvagia is just a game of whack-a-mole. Bongo did give me a challenge in my second playthrough, but that's because I played the N64 version and didn't have the big Goron sword. When you have the big Goron sword, you can kill him in literally a minute. The overworld of the game feels empty. There should have been at least a few houses in the Hyrule field. The grottos also feel randomly placed, and finding some of them can be a challenge. Navi doesn't give you much freedom in the game. She's constantly reminding you of what your next objective is, Every time I go somewhere that's not the dungeon I'm supposed to be at, I constantly hear, "Hey," or "Listen." And one more thing, I hate the fishing pond. It took me forever to get the 10-pound fish. Why couldn't the pond be filled with more fish that are 10 pounds? I want to get a piece of heart, not become a professional fisherman. But anyways, this game will forever be my most favorite game in the Legend of Zelda series. I don't mind the graphics, the really long dialogue, and basic story. I love this game to death. It wasn't my first Zelda game, but it was the one that brought me into the series. Every time I see the start screen, I think to myself, I'm about to start an epic adventure. This game will probably be my favorite, and the only one that could top it would be Breath of the Wild. Overall, I think anyone who hasn't played this game needs to give it a try. If you don't like the graphics of the original, I strongly suggest that you play the remake for the 3DS. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you want me to do any other Zelda game reviews.